I love you, California. You're the greatest state of all. I love you in the winter, summer, spring, and in the fall. I love your fertile valleys, your dear mountains I adore. I love your dear old ocean, and I love your rugged shore.
California is a name from which earliest times has lured men from many distant parts of the world to seek it out, to find its treasure, to settle and dwell in a wonderful land of milk and honey. After Garcia Hernandez de Montalva published his famous book in 1510, Spanish navigators were familiar with both the legend and with the name California. He wrote, "Know that on the right hand of the Indies there is an island called California, very near to the terrestrial paradise, which was peopled with black women. Their arms were all of gold." On June 27, 1542, Juan Rodriguez Cabrillo, in command of the ship San Salvador and La Victoria, set sail from the small port of Navidad in Mexico with orders to examine the western side of California as far northward as possible, seeking particularly for rich countries and for passages leading towards the Atlantic. Cabrillo's expedition was the first recorded one to visit California. He discovered San Diego Bay, Santa Monica Bay, and he passed the Golden Gate without seeing it. Cabrillo died on the return trip, but his men told many a tale of the wondrous sights they had seen. In 1572, an Englishman, Francis Drake, caught his first glimpse of the Pacific Ocean from the top of a goodly and great high tree on the Isthmus of Panama. He made a solemn vow at that time to sail once in an English ship on that sea. 5 years later, his little armada of 5 ships set sail from Plymouth in England on a voyage into the South Sea, and thence about the whole globe of the earth. In the course of this historic voyage, Sir Francis Drake visited California, claimed it for his queen, and called it New Albion. Francisco Gile in 1584, Sebastian Cermeno in 1595, and Sebastian Vizcaino in 1602, Spanish explorers all, made trips to learn more about the wondrous California coast. But it wasn't until the Russians and the English began making moves toward California that plans were laid by the Spanish for the active settlement of Alta California. So it was that in 1769, a small band of soldiers and priests, led by Captain Gaspar de Patola and Padre Junipero Serra, were sent from Mexico to rediscover the people, the bays of San Diego and Monterey. This was the first migration of Franciscan priests and Spanish soldiers. Within the next 50 years, 19 other missions were established, like a chain of beads, one day's march apart, up the coast of California. The missions drew the Indians from the surrounding countryside to live at the compound and work in the adjoining fields. It was a mixed blessing for the Indians and an odd mixture of cultures. For after the hard days in the fields, the Franciscan fathers would teach the Indians to sing ancient Gregorian chants.
Sacramento.
Mexico won its independence from Spain in 1821, and in 1825, California formally became a territory of the Republic of Mexico. During these years, a new kind of Spanish immigrant came into California. Travelers returning to Mexico had told how the mission herds were thriving on the virgin pastures of Alta California. Castilian colonists attempting to raise their cattle on the stony soil of Mexican ranchos were tempted to move up on the coast. The government encouraged them to do this with generous land grants and outfitted each ranchero with a storehouse and at least 2,000 head of cattle. It was a golden time in the Golden State for the rancheros. Their ranch houses, built of sun-dried adobe brick, were comfortable and cool. Fields worked by Indian laborers surrounded the houses, and beyond these were the vast pasture land for the family's herd. It was a time of warm hospitality. One visitor wrote, "If I must be cast in sickness or destitution on the care of the stranger, let it be in California." The rancheros' lives of gentlemanly leisure left plenty of time for fiestas, and there was much eating, drinking, dancing, and best of all, singing.
Yo le di un zapatero que me hiciera unos zapatos con el piquito redondo como lo tienen los patos. Malaya el zapatero, como me engañó, me hizo los zapatos y el piquito no. Malaya el zapatero, como me engañó, me hizo los zapatos y el piquito no. Yo le di un zapatero que me hiciera unos zapatos con el piquito redondo como lo tienen los patos. Malaya el zapatero, como me engañó, me hizo los zapatos y el piquito no. Malaya el zapatero, como me engañó, me hizo los zapatos y el piquito no. La noche está serena, tranquilo el aguilón. Tu dulce sentinela te guarda el corazón. Llena las de los que vagan por doquier. Volando van mis súplicas a ti, bella mujer. Volando van mis súplicas a ti, bella mujer.
Mexico's hold over her California province was always a weak one. For instance, she failed to send regular supply ships to the colonists. Thus, even though foreign ships were forbidden to land in California, the Californios of necessity welcomed the Yankee ships, bringing as they did such necessities as skillets, needles, cotton cloth, and plows. In return, the Yankee ships took California hides back to Boston. One cowhide was called a California dollar and was worth about $3 American. This trade was so lucrative that the profit to the ship owners was often 300% or better. Soon, many American ships were making the long voyage around the Horn to California. The voyage took over 5 months, so it was no wonder the sailors relieved many of the long hours in singing their chanties.
Oh, the Hog-Eye man he's the man for me. He was raised way down in Tennessee with a Hog-Eye. Row a boat ashore with a Hog-Eye. Row a boat ashore with a Hog-Eye. All she wants is a Hog-Eye man. Oh, the Hog-Eye man is all the go when he comes down to old San Francisco with a Hog-Eye. Row a boat ashore with a Hog-Eye. Row a boat ashore with a Hog-Eye. All she wants is a Hog-Eye man. Oh, go fetch me down my riding cane, for I'm going to see my darling Jane with a Hog-Eye. Row a boat ashore with a Hog-Eye. Row a boat ashore with a Hog-Eye. All she wants is a Hog-Eye man. Hog-Eye man. Hog-Eye man. Hog-Eye man.
Hundreds of reports describing California as a perfect paradise, a perpetual spring, had started Eastern American families building prairie schooners in the decade before the gold rush. The first train left Independence, Missouri on May 19, 1841, and reached the San Joaquin Valley on November 4th. By 1846, thousands, including the tragic Donner Party, almost half of whom died of exposure and starvation, were on the westward trails. Around their campfires on the long, lonely trail, the overlanders kept up their spirits with many a song.
I wish I was an apple hanging on a tree, and every time my true love passed, he'd take a bite out of me.
He told me he didn't love me, he called me Sugar Plum, and throwed his arms around me. I thought my time had come.
Get along home, Cindy, Cindy, get along home tonight. Get along home, Cindy, Cindy, I'll marry you sometime. He took me to his parlor, he cooled me with a fan. He swore that I was the prettiest thing in the shape of mortal man.
I wish I had a needle as fine as I could sew. I'd sew the boys to my coattail and down the road I'd go.
Get along home, Cindy, Cindy, get along home tonight. Get along home, Cindy, Cindy, I'll marry you sometime. Cindy got religion, she had it once before. When she heard my old banjo, she was the first on the floor. She went to the preaching, she swung round and round. She got so full of glory, she knocked the preacher down. Get along home, Cindy, Cindy, get along home tonight. Get along home, Cindy, Cindy, I'll marry you sometime. I'll marry you sometime. I'll marry you sometime.
The war by which California became an American state was one of the most pleasant ever fought. It had a false start on October 19, 1842, when Commander Thomas Jones sailed into Monterey and ordered the port to surrender to the United States. The commander had heard that Mexico was at war with the United States and hurried north to annex California. When he learned that no war had been declared, he retired from Monterey with elaborate apologies. Then, in 1844, Captain John C. Fremont arrived overland with a detachment of U.S. soldiers on a so-called scientific expedition. For the next 3 years, Fremont and Commanders Sloat and Stockton on the American side, and General Jose Castro and General Pico on the California side, engaged in a war which involved much capturing of cities and raising the American flag a good deal, and of recapturing the same cities and hauling down the flag. Hardly a shot was fired, however, even in the final battle of the war, which took place at San Gabriel and La Mesa on January 8th and 9th, 1847. There were 600 men in each army, and while casualties were very slight, the Californians surrendered, and once again, the American flag flew over Los Angeles. General Pico met with General Fremont in a ranch house near Cahuenga Pass in Los Angeles, where the Articles of Capitulation were signed. It was like the patching up of a war by old friends, for all the Californians were required to do was give up their artillery and pledge to obey the laws of the United States. California was formally relinquished by Mexico on February 2nd, 1848, when the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo was signed. The highest United States official in California, the U.S. military governor, General Bennett Riley, was instrumental in the high-handed way in which the state declared itself into the Union. On December 15, 1849, the duly elected legislature of California convened and elected 2 United States senators, John C. Fremont and William M. Whim, without so much as a by-your-leave from the American government. Then General Riley resigned. His resignation constituted a recognition that California had declared itself to be a state. Legally, of course, it had no right to do so without federal permission. However, after 8 months of argument in Congress, California was finally formally admitted to the Union on September 9, 1850. California's admission to the Union was inevitable, and while events leading up to it were important, there was something else taking place at the same time which was to set in motion the greatest mass movement of people since the Crusades. It was, of course, the discovery of gold at Sutter's Fort in January 1848. The first rush to the gold fields came from the inhabitants of California itself. As Walter Colton of Monterey wrote, the blacksmith dropped his hammer, the carpenter his plane, the mason his trowel, the farmer his sickle, the baker his loaf, and the tapster his bottle. All were off for the mines, some on horses, some on carts, some on crutches, and one went in a litter. But not all found gold. Some found other things, as this song tells.
It's 4 long years since I reached this land in search of gold among the rocks and sand, and yet I'm poor when the truth is told. I'm a lousy miner, I'm a lousy miner in search of shining gold. I was covered with lice coming on the boat. I threw away my fancy swallow-tailed coat, and now they crawl up and down my back. I'm a lousy miner, I'm a lousy miner, a pile is all I lack. My sweetheart vowed she'd wait for me till I returned, but don't you see, she's married now, sure so I'm told. Left her lousy miner, left her lousy miner in search of shining gold. Oh, land of gold, you did me deceive, and I intend in thee my bones to leave. So farewell home, now my friends grow cold. I'm a lousy miner, I'm a lousy miner in search of shining gold. I'm a lousy miner, I'm a lousy miner in search of shining gold.
By the summer of 1848, scarcely a mail remained in the cities and towns of California. Soldiers deserted, as did the detachments sent to bring them back. Hundreds of ships lay at anchor in San Francisco, their crews gone to the foothills. The gold fever spread almost as quickly throughout the nation and the world. At one time, westbound wagon trains passed between Missouri and Fort Laramie in an unbroken stream for 2 months. Between 1847 and 1850, the population of California increased from 15,000 to 92,500. In the boisterous shanty towns of gold rush days, Get Up and Get, Bogus Thunder, Angel's Camp, You Bet, Shinbone Creek, Red Dog, Lazy Man's Canyon, the average return was $50 a day, though many made much more. From one panful of dirt, $1,500 was washed, and a trench 100 feet long yielded its miner $17,000 in 7 days. Fully as much was made by those who served the miners. Many a tent store took in $1,000 a day. Owners of river steamers, stagecoaches, and hotels made fortunes. And after the hard days of work, the miners would entertain themselves and be entertained by many a rowdy song.
We've formed our band and we are well manned. Doo-dah, doo-dah, we'll journey up far to the promised land. Oh, doo-dah day, where the golden ore is rich in store. Doo-dah, doo-dah, on the banks of the Sacramento shore. Oh, doo-dah day, then home, boys, home, to California go. There's plenty of gold, so I been told, on the banks of the Sacramento. As the gold is there most everywhere, doo-dah, doo-dah, and they dig it out with an iron bar all doo-dah day. And where it's thick with a spade or pick, doo-dah, doo-dah, they can shovel up lumps as heavy as brick all doo-dah day. Then ho, boys, ho, to California go. There's plenty of stones and dead men's bones on the banks of the Sacramento. Then ho, boys, ho, to California go. There's plenty of gold, so I've been told, on the banks of the Sacramento.
With the making of a great deal of money, there comes a dreadful compulsion on the part of some men to steal it. Thus, among the thousands of men migrating to California, there were bad men as well as good, and many a tough gunslinger was attracted to California and his gold. But there were also native Californian banditos like Joaquin Murrieta or Tiburcio Vasquez, waiting in their hiding places to rustle horses or hijack stagecoaches. The completion of a transcontinental railroad, as signified by the driving of a golden spike at the juncture of the Union Pacific and Central Pacific tracks at Promontory Point, Utah, on May the 10th, 1869, was a signal for another great migration to California, this time by rail. But the building of the railroad itself caused a considerable migration. Over 15,000 Chinese coolies were imported to force the Central Pacific tracks across the formidable barrier of the Sierra Nevada mountains. And many of the track-laying gangs and train crews from the Union Pacific ultimately made their way to the golden land of California. The railroaders had their own way of life, their own language, and, of course, their own songs.
The Great Pacific Railway for California hail. Bring on the locomotive, lay down the iron rail. Across the road in prairies, by steam we're bound to go. The railroad cars are coming, humming through New Mexico. The railroad cars are coming, humming through New Mexico. The little dogs in Dogtown will wag each little tail. They'll think that something's coming, a-riding on a rail. The rattlesnake will show its fangs, the old to-wits to-hoo. The railroad cars are coming, humming through New Mexico. The railroad cars are coming, humming through New Mexico.
The completion of Santa Fe Railroad's line into Los Angeles in 1886 was a spark that touched off another great migration to California. A rate war between the Santa Fe and the Southern Pacific started almost immediately, and rates fell and fell until for one period, a passenger could ride from Kansas City to Los Angeles for $1. After the rate war was over, however, the migration continued, encouraged for the first time by professional boosters. Writers and lecturers, often on the payrolls of the railroads, spewed out millions of words on the wonders of California. And so the migrants came by the thousands, only to be greeted as they got off the train by the greatest collection of real estate sharks ever assembled. They captured the tenderfoot, whisked him off following a brass band to a new subdivision where the Joshua trees were carefully hung with oranges and where a silver-throated auctioneer soon sold him a lot. There was one consolation for the tourist who got there early. He sold his newly acquired lot to another tenderfoot just off the train at twice what it had cost him. Seeing how easily money could be made, many of the early arrivals became real estate promoters, or escrow Indians, as they were called, and soon were putting out their own eloquent handbills. Grand Jubilee auction, free excursion, brass band, brilliant music, lunch served by New York caterers with California fruits and wine, lunch and music free as air. And so, Music and song sold California real estate.
There is no land upon the earth contains the same amount of worth, and he that could not here reside had ought to freeze the other side. You who don't believe it, you who don't believe it, you who don't believe it, come yourselves and see. We've got the highest mountains here, taller trees and faster deer, and travel more at higher rates than people in the eastern states. You who don't believe it, you who don't believe it, you who don't believe it, come yourselves and see. To one and all, both young and old, you're welcome to the land of gold. So come along, be not afraid, we guarantee you all well paid. You who don't believe it, you who don't believe it, you who don't believe it, come yourselves and see, come yourselves and see.
The boom of 1886 and 87 collapsed with a crash, but most of the newcomers stayed in California. Another boom came along in 1906, set off by the completion of the Pacific Electric's network of interurban big red cars. Still another, and one of the biggest, sparked by general prosperity, oil, and the movies, came in the 1920s. Over 2 million people migrated to California in this decade, 72% of them settling in Southern California, with Los Angeles County recording a gain of over 1,200,000. The Great Depression of the 1930s and the terrible windstorms that turned parts of the Middle and Southwest into a dust bowl resulted in yet another migration to California, the land of hope. On the highways leading to California, there now appeared many an antiquated vehicle. Like the covered wagons of earlier migrations, these beat-up automobiles usually carried all their owners' worldly goods: pots, pans, beddings, basin, wash tubs. These latter-day prairie schooners stopped for the night at wayside camps, and once again, campfires burned along western trails. Stories of hardship were told. The dust was drifted high as the windowsills. The cattle died a-looking at you. Wouldn't a blade of grass grow anywhere in the valley? And sometimes sad songs were sung.
Times are getting hard, boys. Money's getting scarce. If things don't get no better soon, I'm bound to leave this place. Take my true love by the hand, lead her through the town. Say goodbye to everyone, goodbye to everyone. Take my Bible from the bed, my rifle from the wall. Take old Sal and hitch her up the wagon for to
World War II had a profound effect on California. Nearly 10% of the material for the war was manufactured in the state, notably in the aircraft industry. Manufacturing employment rose from 400,000 to over 1 million, and many of these new workers migrated from the East. In addition, nearly 8 million soldiers, sailors, and Marines received their training or traveled through or embarked from California. As they did so, many of them caught a glimpse for the first time of a rich land that looked to them as if it were a terrestrial paradise. And so, like so many men in history before them, they returned after the war to settle and dwell in a wonderful land of milk and honey.